All right, good afternoon and thank you for coming. So my name is Meredith Ringel Morris and I am presenting research conducted at Microsoft Research Redmond with our colleagues Jazette Johnson, Cynthia Bennett, and Ed Cutrell. Digital imagery pervades modern life. More than 1 billion images per day are produced and uploaded to social media sites, and we also encounter digital images on websites, in apps, in digital documents, and in ebooks. Engaging with digital imagery is part of the fabric of participation in contemporary society, including education, the professions, e-commerce, civic participation, entertainment, and social interactions. However, engaging with digital imagery remains challenging to the 39 million people worldwide who are blind. People who are blind access their computer using screen readers, which are software that read the contents of the screen out loud. For text, this is straightforward, but when a screen reader encounters an image, it instead reads out the alt text if the content author has provided it. So this is an example from my website of the HTML specification for alternative text. So in this case, I have described the image as a short researcher stands between two very tall members of the Harlem Globetrotters basketball team. And that is what would be read out loud to someone who's visually impaired when they encounter that image on their computer. So alt text arose with the HTML2 standard in 1995, and it was originally conceived for cases where a user had a text-based browser or a very slow internet connection that couldn't load imagery. Of course, the capability of computers and the volume, importance, and purpose of digital imagery have evolved substantially since 1995. However, the experience of consuming visual content by a screen reader has remained frozen in time. So in this research, we consider how modern computing capabilities can provide a new experience of visual content for screen readers. The contributions of our research include 1, a design space for representing visual content to screen reader users, 2, prototypes of novel interactions that sample from this design space, and finally, evaluations of these prototypes with screen reader users to gauge their reactions to improved alt text experiences. So first, we propose a taxonomy of properties relevant to representing visual content non-visually. Articulating this taxonomy reveals an unexplored design space of potential property combinations, and this design space can be a useful tool for researchers who are interested in expanding the possibilities of presenting image captions to screen reader users. Our first dimension is interactivity. So standard alt text today is passive. The screen reader simply reads the caption aloud to the user. However, there's no technical impediment to developing systems in which the user's activity, such as speaking a command, pressing a key or button, performing a gesture, might actually determine the alt text that they receive. The second dimension is stability. So standard alt text today is static. The content author produces a single caption for the image. However, there are many reasons why a caption might evolve over time. For example, you might want to add additional content that's been requested by an end user, or to correct mistakes made by an automated system, or perhaps include user feedback on the caption quality. The third dimension is the representation. So that indicates the format in which the caption information is presented. Standard alt text right now only consists of a textual representation, which is rendered out loud via the screen reader. However, other media formats or modalities could also be used to represent a rich and evocative understanding of an image to the end user, such as sound effects, music, haptic feedback, etc. A fourth dimension we consider is structure. So standard alt text today is unstructured. It simply consists of one or more words or phrases. However, structuring alt text with an ontology or metadata would allow users to better query or filter on certain types of detail based on their interests. And finally, the last dimension we consider is personalization. So today, alt text is generic. The same alt text is read out loud to any user who encounters the image. However, it might be desirable to personalize aspects of alt text delivery. So for example, in the context of social media, a different caption might be read aloud for an image depending on the user's relationship with the people depicted. An image might be described to me as containing my sister and described to you as containing Jane Smith. Caption delivery could also be personalized based on a preference profile, for example, describing the types of details that interest a user. So drawing inspiration from our design space, we prototyped 6 novel interactions that illustrate different properties of the taxonomy, which I'll introduce to you now. So first, once again, just considering standard alt text that I presented before in the context of our taxonomy, today's alt text is passive, static, text-based, unstructured, and generic to all users. The first interaction that we introduce is progressive detail. So this is an alt text that's designed to give the user control over the level of detail they receive based on their level of interest in the image. The content author can specify multiple alt texts for the same image and indicate a logical ordering. This implementation supports a variable number of levels of detail. In this example, there are 3.
Level 1, a family photo taken with Tigger at Disneyland.
She slides her finger across the screen, then taps it twice.
Level 2, Tigger is signing the family's autograph book.
She taps the screen again.
Level 3, the family consists of a father and preschool-aged boy and girl, and they are standing outdoors in the sun.
By the way, in all of these example videos that we're showing for our implementation, the user is using buttons and swiping gestures to interact with the alt text. However, that's just one example instantiation. You could imagine the user might use voice commands or keyboard shortcuts, etc., in order to interact, depending on the kind of system they had. So the next prototype is the multimedia alt text, which introduces the concept of alt audio to supplement or substitute for the textual description. So you might use music or sound effects as an alt audio in order to create a rich sense of presence and aesthetic around an image. Here is an example.
Multimedia. Here the standard alt text information combined with sounds associated with the image to provide a rich understanding.
A family photo taken with Tigger at Disneyland.
So you can hear the birds in the outdoor summer scene.
Multimedia.
Our next prototype is spatial alt text, which is an interaction style designed to allow direct interaction with an image in a way that can help the end user build a mental model of the relative location of components of the image. And an example.
Interact with an image to get a spatial understanding of where everything is by just dragging your finger.
She runs her finger over different areas of the photo.
A man with gray hair. 2 small children holding autograph books. A person wearing a Tigger costume signing an autograph book.
Our next technique is the categories technique, which creates a highly structured set of metadata that can be queried as a way to supplement a more traditional free-form alt text. This technique takes inspiration from findings that structured formats can help workers in creating better alt text for STEM diagrams. And in our prototype, we use 6 different categories of information based on some user studies by Salisbury et al. Around what kinds of details are important to people who are visually impaired. Here's an example.
Categories. Access structured information such as the type of image, the setting of the image, the number of people in the image.
She taps the touch screen again.
Image type snapshot.
She swipes her finger across it.
Setting outdoors. Action signing autograph.
She taps and swipes for more information.
3 people. Emotion happy. No humor.
So again, you could imagine someone querying those interactively rather than going through them one by one. So the user might be able to ask how many people are in the image, and because of the structure, the system could return the answer 3. The question and answer alt text allows for content that grows over time. So if the listener has a question about the image or wants to know details not present in the base alt text, they can press a button that allows them to enter a question. Questions and any answers eventually received are then appended to the alt text XML, such that when the user hears the base alt text, they can also hear how many questions are present and choose to play the questions and answers if they've been supplied. This technique can also be personalized so that a user can only hear their own questions and answers versus choosing if they also want to hear questions and answers from other users. Answers can be generated by sending the questions directly to the content author or through online human computation techniques like crowd and friend sourcing, and eventually as it improves through automated AI techniques. Here's an example of that.
Question and answer. hear questions that were previously asked about the image, and ask questions about the image.
She taps the screen.
Who is in the family? A father and two small children. What is in the background of the image? Trees and a wood sign that says the gathering spot.
She swipes the screen.
Google.
What color is Tigger?
What is the color of Tigger? Tigger is orange with black striped.
And finally, our hyperlink interaction is meant to allow users to interactively query detailed visual descriptions or details related to well-known people, places, or things that may be present in an image. For example, if an image says, this is a picture of the Statue of Liberty, perhaps someone who has been visually impaired since birth might not know what the Statue of Liberty looks like and might want to dig deeper into that entity in particular. In our prototype, we combine the hyperlink interaction with the spatial technique. So as you drag your finger over an object for which a hyperlink is available, you hear a cue that you can double tap on that object to hear more description that comes from a database of known entities. Here's an example of that.
Hyperlink. Receive descriptive and historical details about a popular person, place, or thing by double tapping the image.
She double taps Tigger in the photo.
Tigger is an orange with black stripes cartoon tiger. You can find him in the Winnie the Pooh cartoon or a Disney amusement park. More description, Tigger is always jolly.
So in our paper, we have more details on the evaluation we conducted. Our main things we wanted to understand about these novel techniques was what users' reactions to them are in comparison to status quo alt text, how these techniques might influence image understanding, and how these interactions can be further improved. We conducted a user study with 14 blind participants who experienced these techniques in different scenarios, such as a digital textbook, reading news articles, navigating shopping sites, and perusing social media. And more details about the design of the experiment are in the paper. But I just wanted to highlight high level some of the participants' feedback on the techniques. So for example, with the progressive detail techniques, participants' favorite aspect was the control it gave them over the amount of information they got about an image. Participants said things like, "This is fantastic, I have the flexibility to skip things if I want to," or "This gave me control of getting more information when I wanted it," and "I like to decide when I want more information. Today it's all or nothing." In terms of future work, participants noted the need for authoring guidelines for content creators. For example, in thinking about how you might order the different levels of detail, or how many levels of detail different types of images warrant in different situations. In terms of the spatial technique, participants' favorite aspect was understanding the relative locations of objects in the image. So for example, one participant noted that the technique showed me where people or items were in relation to each other. Another felt that it gave them a picture to visualize. And a third said, "I'm able to build a mental map of the image." Participants really also enjoyed the hands-on interaction, saying things like, "I like how you can explore with fingers," and "I'm a very tactile person." In terms of future work, one issue is thinking about what the right density is for how many active regions within an image ought to be labeled, and also a discovery issue. So for example, P12 commented they didn't always know how many things within an image were tagged, so they weren't sure if they had completed exploring an entire image or not. And finally, with the multimedia technique, this one received the most bimodal distribution of reactions. So participants either loved it or hated it. People who liked this technique really liked the evocative nature of the alt audio, saying things like the sound can be associated with emotion, and the audio creates an emotional attachment to the image. One felt the audio in one case was very funny and helped make her smile. However, people who didn't like this technique felt that the alt audio might interfere with the comprehension of the base alt text itself. So this research is a first step toward enhancing the experience of digital imagery for screen reader users. Our taxonomy of caption properties, our prototypes that embody a new combination of these properties, and our user feedback on these prototypes helps provide insight into the potential benefits and challenges of supplementing the status quo experience of hearing a simple alt text. there is, of course, a lot of future work to consider. One really important area is authorship. So today, missing or low quality alt text is a pervasive problem online, and it's unclear how our new prototype interactions might impact compliance with alt text guidelines. So understanding this issue better and creating novel authoring tools that make it easy for content authors to create rich interactive alt text is an important area of future work. Another important area is thinking about what it means for alt text and rich experiences of the visual world to extend off of the screen and into new modalities such as augmented and virtual reality, which are very heavily visually based today. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. As I mentioned on Twitter, I have fancy chocolate that I'm happy to share with anyone who asks me a question afterwards. You can download our paper at aka.ms/richalttext. And we also have a video of our interaction techniques at aka.ms/alttextvideo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions?
It's really good chocolate, I promise.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Krosnick from University of Michigan. I had a question about how do you think your techniques can apply to even more very highly structured diagrams, like system diagrams in papers or binary search tree, like an intro computer science course, electronic book. Yeah, I was just curious how.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So in our examples, as you saw in the video, we were primarily focused on more photography-like imagery. But of course, there are many different kinds of images that exist today, including more like data diagrams and graphs that you might find in textbooks and news articles. I think that these basic ideas would also apply to those types of diagrams. For example, being able to spatially interact with data seems particularly relevant. In fact, I think that's one of the things that's helpful about the articulated design space is that I think it identifies dimensions, some of which may be more or less relevant to different categories of images, but we're hopeful that this framework can help inspire other people to build on it and explore new interactions along these dimensions that might be relevant in different situations.
Hi, Matt Unerfauth from RIT. I was wondering whether your team had considered or whether this issue had come up about sighted users possibly being interested in gaining access to some of this richer content. I know they don't normally get too excited about trying to read the alt text, but I don't know if this issue arose.
Absolutely, and I think this is a great example of a case where improving accessibility experiences can actually create something that's a richer experience for everyone. So for example, with the multimedia alt text, I could very well imagine that the idea of including, an alt audio in your image could be something that's very appealing to sighted users as well. Maybe it's even built into the new camera apps of the future that it captures the sound effects from your environment as you take a picture, and that's part of what you share. And I think that actually can create a richer experience for everyone. So I think that's very exciting. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, Ugniklau, University of Lisbon. I was just wondering whether during your user studies, some of the users came up with the idea of combining those techniques.
Yes, absolutely. So the techniques are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So for example, you could combine progressive detail together with alt audio, or in our example, we combined the hyperlink technique with the spatial technique. So I think that's definitely something that could be done. And again, I think that's also an area where exploring the authorship interfaces more will be really important, both for coming up with not only good interfaces that make it easy to author rich alt text, but also coming up with guidelines for authors about what types of alt text and combinations of alt text properties might be well suited to different scenarios and user groups. Great, thank you. Come find me afterwards for chocolate.
Thank you, Mary.